Two children sat in one of Manhattan's most expensive restaurants. They signed to the hostess. She looked away. They signed to the waiter. He walked past. They signed to the woman paid to care for them. She didn't even look up. Nobody would speak to them. Nobody tried. Then a black waitress knelt beside their table and moved her hands. "What the hell are you doing? Get away from them. Look at you. Grease and sweat. People like you don't touch children like these." The blonde woman's chair scraped marble as she stood. The waitress didn't stand. Her hands kept moving. Steady, gentle. "He's telling me he can't breathe." "Ma'am, that's not your problem." Every fork stopped. 40 strangers watched her get torn apart for saving a child, and not a single one spoke. But what none of them knew was who was about to walk through those front doors. Have you ever felt that rush when someone who was mocked and dismissed for the color of their skin rises up and proves every single person in the room wrong? Because you are about to. Let me take you back to the beginning. The restaurant is called Lamian Door. It sits on East 68th Street in Manhattan's Upper East Side like a monument to money. Crystal chandeliers throw soft gold across white tablecloths. Carpet is thick enough to swallow footsteps. A single entree here costs $280, and the wine list starts at $500. The air smells like seared butter, aged oak, and the quiet confidence of people who have never once checked the price tag. The staff are trained to be invisible. Pour the water before the glass is empty. Clear the plate before the last bite is cold. Smile, nod, disappear. In this world, silence is a luxury, not a prison. Rihanna Townsend arrived for the evening shift the way she always did, quietly. She was tall and slender, with warm dark skin and natural curly hair pulled into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. No makeup, maybe a touch of light lip color. Her uniform was pressed, her black apron tied precisely, her leather shoes polished, though the soles had worn thin months ago. She moved through the restaurant with a quiet grace, the kind that comes from a lifetime of learning how to take up as little space as possible. She was 29 years old. She had a degree in deaf education from Gallaudet University, the most prestigious institution for deaf studies in America. She graduated top of her class. She was fluent in American Sign Language. Not the clumsy textbook kind, but the living, breathing kind. The kind you learn when your little brother is born deaf and your mother dies when you are 14. There was no money for interpreters, no money for special schools, no money for anything except love and two hands willing to learn. Her brother's name was Raymond. He was 6 when their mother passed. Brianna was 14. She taught herself ASL from library books and free videos, practicing in front of mirrors until her fingers ached. By 16, she could sign faster than most certified interpreters. By 18, she was Raymond's voice in parent-teacher meetings, doctor's appointments, every single moment where the hearing world demanded words and Raymond had none to give. She had a career. She had a calling. She had a reason to wake up. Then 2 years ago, Raymond was killed crossing Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. A distracted driver ran a red light. Raymond never heard the car coming. He was 23 years old. The grief didn't arrive all at once. It crept. It filled every room she entered. She couldn't sign anymore. Every handshape felt like his hand. Every silent conversation reminded her of his laugh, the one that came out uneven and too loud, and was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard in her life. She left teaching, left the deaf community, left everything that reminded her of him. She took a job as a waitress because it required nothing of her heart, until tonight. At Lamian Door, the manager was a man named Gregory Dawson, 45. Thin smile, thinner principles. He ran the restaurant the way certain men run small kingdoms, with invisible rules everyone understood but nobody said out loud. Brianna always got the worst sections. The tables near the kitchen, the ones by the bathroom, the spots where tips were small and eye contact was rare. The prime window seats went to Heather Collins and the other white servers. Gregory never said anything about race. He didn't need to. The schedule said it for him. In the staff corridor before service, Heather leaned against the wall with her arms crossed. "Back section again, Bree." Brianna shrugged. "At least it's quiet." She didn't know it yet, One, but that word was about to take on an entirely different meaning. Because in less than 40 minutes, two silent children were going to walk through those doors. When the silence Brianna Townsend had been hiding in for 2 years was going to shatter right here on this cold marble floor in front of everyone. And nothing would ever be quiet again. Whoa. She hadn't told anyone at the restaurant about her degree, hadn't mentioned Raymond or ASL or anything about the life she left behind. To Gregory, she was just another server, and not a particularly important one. To the guests, she was invisible. That was fine. Invisible was safe. Invisible meant no one asked questions she couldn't answer without breaking apart. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, picked up her notepad, and pushed through the kitchen doors into the golden light of the dining room. Table 9, table 11. Smile, pour, disappear. Just another Tuesday night. Or so she thought. The front door opened at 7:45, and the temperature in the room dropped. Diane Prescott walked in the way a blade enters skin. Sharp, cold, already drawing blood before anyone noticed the wound. She was tall and rigid, fair skin under meticulous makeup. Not a single expression line visible, like a porcelain mask, molded to look human but missing something essential. Her blonde hair was straightened and cut at shoulder length, not a strand out of place. Cream Chanel blazer, Hermes bag, sunglasses perched on her head despite the evening hour. Her heels clicked the marble like a metronome counting down to something terrible. Behind her, almost invisible, were two children, Oliver and Eloise Ashford, 8 years old, twins, matching outfits that were expensive but joyless, chosen by someone who dressed them like accessories, not children. Oliver's eyes scanned the room the way animals scan for predators. Quick, watchful, already expecting disappointment. Eloise clutched a worn sketchbook to her chest with both arms, holding it the way other children hold stuffed animals, like a shield, like the last safe thing she owned. War. Diane snapped her fingers at the hostess without breaking stride. Ashford, reservation, best table. If you even think about putting us near the kitchen, I will end this restaurant's reputation before dessert. Gregory materialized instantly, all smiles and bent spine. He escorted them to the prime window table, the one with the chandelier light and the Central Park view. Brianna's section had been reassigned at the last second. Gregory glanced at her once, then redirected the service to Heather. Heather approached. The twins looked up at her and signed, small hands, hopeful faces. Heather froze, smiled uncomfortably, and turned to Diane for help. Diane didn't look up from her phone. Just take the order. They can't hear you. I'll order for them. She ordered 2 children's plates, walnut-crusted chicken, without asking the twins what they wanted. Without checking the allergy card tucked inside the small backpack she had shoved under her chair, without checking anything. Oliver tried to get her attention. He signed eagerly, rapidly, pointing out the window at something that excited him, his face alive with the kind of enthusiasm only 8-year-olds possess. Diane's eyes never left her screen. Stop waving your hands. People are staring. Oliver's hands fell to his lap. His chin dropped. Under the table, Eloise found his hand and held it. She held it the way you hold someone's hand when you've both learned the same lesson. That your language is an embarrassment, and your voice is a burden, and the adults around you wish you would simply stop existing. The dining room hummed along. Crystal clinked. Wine poured. Nobody noticed the silence at that table. The specific, bruising silence of children who have been taught that speaking is something they should apologize for. Then Oliver knocked over his water glass. Ice scattered across the white tablecloth. Water pooled toward Diane's Hermes bag. Her reaction was instant, venomous. She grabbed Oliver's wrist hard enough to leave marks and hissed through perfect teeth. Do you have any idea how much this dinner costs? Sit still. Don't move. Eloise flinched so hard her crayon snapped. 2 tears rolled down her cheeks without a sound. She had never made a sound. She never would. Brianna saw it from 2 tables away. She saw the boy's face crumple. She saw the red marks forming on his thin wrist. Something cracked deep in her chest, the sound a frozen lake makes before it gives way. She walked over with a cloth to clean the spill. Diane looked up. The porcelain mask tilted. Her eyes traveled over Brianna slowly, deliberately, from her worn shoes to her dark skin, to her tightly pulled hair. The way you look at something on the bottom of your shoe. I didn't ask for you. She turned to Gregory with a smile that was not a smile. Can we get someone more suitable for this section? I prefer someone who matches the standard of this establishment. Gregory said nothing. He nodded. Brianna retreated to the corridor. Her hands were shaking. Heather found her leaning against the wall, jaw locked, eyes burning. Bree, are you okay? Those kids are trying to talk to her. She's not listening. She's not even trying. Heather's voice dropped. It's not our table, Bree. They're not a table. They're children. A few minutes later, Brianna passed the window table one more time to serve a nearby booth. She glanced down. Eloise's sketchbook was open. Drawing showed two small stick figures sitting at a large table alone. No other figures in the picture. Around the table, tall shapes, adults all turned away. Backs facing the children, every single one. At the top, when a child's unsteady handwriting, one word invisible. Brianna's breath stopped. She kept walking, but her eyes were on fire. At the far end of the bar, a man in a dark jacket sat nursing a club soda. He had been there since the twins arrived. He watched the wrist grab. He watched the waitress get dismissed. His name was Carl. He worked for the children's father, and his phone was in his hand, ready. Before anyone walked through any door, something far more dangerous was coming. Oliver's face was turning pale. His hands were moving again. Not with excitement this time, with fear. And no one was paying attention. No one except her. Gregory caught up with Brianna before she reached the kitchen. He pulled her aside, his voice low but sharp. Brianna, I told you the VIP section isn't your assignment tonight. I was just cleaning the spill, Greg. I don't care. That woman is connected to the Ashford family. Do you understand what that means? One complaint and this restaurant loses a client worth more than your annual salary in a single evening. Brianna met his eyes. A child just got grabbed hard enough to bruise. You saw it? Gregory's jaw tightened. He leaned closer. What I saw is a waitress who can't seem to stay in her section. Now get back to your tables before I write you up. He paused, then added quieter. And honestly, Brianna, she's not entirely wrong. The VIP section has a certain image. You know how it works. She knew exactly how it worked. She had known since she was 12 years old. Heather was waiting around the corner wide-eyed. Did he just... Yeah. Brianna's voice was flat. He did. Heather opened her mouth, closed it. There was nothing to say that they both didn't already know. Brianna went back to work. Table 9 needed a wine refill. Table 11 wanted the check. She poured. She smiled. She disappeared. That was the job. That was the deal she had made with herself 2 years ago. Trade the heart for a paycheck. Trade the silence for survival. But her body was still facing the twins' direction. Her eyes kept pulling back, and her hands, the hands that hadn't signed in 2 years, were tingling at her sides, like a limb waking from numbness. Then she saw it. Oliver was tugging on Diane's sleeve, not eagerly this time, desperately. His face was pale, almost gray. His small hands were moving in rapid, jagged signs. Not the fluid kind, the panicked kind, like birds beating against glass. Diane pulled her arm away without looking. I said, "Stop. What is wrong with you tonight?" What Brianna's hands knew before her brain caught up. 2 years of silence and her body still translated before she could stop it. Her fingers twitched, her breath caught. She froze mid-pour at table 9, wine bottle hovering over a glass she couldn't see anymore because Oliver was signing 3 words. My stomach hurts. Something is wrong. I can't breathe right. 2 years of silence shattered in a single second. Brianna set the bottle down. She didn't think. She didn't weigh the consequences. She didn't consider Gregory's warning, or Diane's contempt, or the job she couldn't afford to lose. She walked straight to the twins' table, and she knelt eye-level with Oliver, the cold marble pressing into her knees, her heart slamming so hard she could feel it in her throat. She raised her hands, and for a moment they trembled. Wee's hands hadn't formed these shapes since the day she signed "I love you" to her brother's casket. Every gesture carried a ghost, but she signed slowly at first, rusty, uncertain, Like a musician picking up an instrument she swore she would never play again. Then faster. The grammar flooded back, the facial expressions, the spatial markers. Muscle memory is merciless. It doesn't care about grief. It just remembers. I hear you, she signed. I see you. Tell me what's wrong. Oliver's face, and this is important because this is the moment the entire story turns, shifted the way sunrise shifts the sky. Not all at once, in layers. First, confusion, because no stranger had spoken to him in his language in months. Then shock, because her signs were fluent, native, real. Then something that broke across his features like a wave. He couldn't hold back. Pure, desperate, overwhelming joy. The joy of a child who has been screaming into a void. And finally, someone answered. His mouth opened in a silent gasp. Eloise dropped her crayon. Both children stared at Brianna, as if she had materialized from thin air. As if she were not a waitress, but a miracle in a black apron. Oliver signed back fast, his small fingers tumbling over each other. My tummy burns like fire since the cookies in the car. Eloise grabbed Brianna's hand and squeezed so hard her tiny knuckles turned white. Diane stood up. The porcelain mask cracked for the first time, a flash of shock before the anger filled it back in. What do you think you're doing? Step away from those children right now. You're a waitress. You have no authorization to interact with them. Brianna didn't stand. She stayed at Oliver's level. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but there was iron underneath, the kind forged by years of fighting for a boy who couldn't fight for himself. He's telling me his stomach hurts. It started after cookies in the car. Did you check whether those cookies contain tree nuts? The color drained from Diane's face, then flooded back hot and red. The answer was written in the silence that followed. Brianna was already moving. Where's his medical bag? Every child with severe allergies carries one. She spotted the twins' backpack shoved under Diane's chair, a small emergency medical tag dangling from the zipper. Diane had carried it into the restaurant and immediately forgotten it existed. Brianna pulled it out. Inside, an EpiPen, an allergy card listing tree nuts, severe, and a laminated sheet of emergency ASL signs worn soft at the edges by hands that had held it hundreds of times. Hands that were no longer alive. Someone had prepared for this moment, someone who loved these children more than anything in the world. And the woman paid to protect them hadn't even opened the bag. Oliver's lips were swelling. His breath came in thin, ragged pulls, the sound of air being squeezed through a closing door. His skin had gone from pale to gray. Early anaphylaxis. Minutes mattered now. Brianna didn't hesitate. She uncapped the EpiPen, placed her left hand firmly on Oliver's thigh to keep him still, and drove the needle into his outer leg with the precision of someone who had done this before. Years of caring for Raymond had taught her. Every emergency room visit, every allergic scare, every midnight crisis, she had been the one holding the pen, holding the child, holding everything together. She signed to Oliver the entire time, narrating every step. Calm hands, steady rhythm. This is medicine. It will help you breathe. You're going to be okay. I'm right here. Oliver's eyes locked onto her hands like a lifeline thrown across dark water. She pulled out her phone and called 911. Her voice was flat, efficient, precise. Lamian Door, East 68th Street, 8-year-old male, approximately 55 pounds, suspected anaphylaxis from tree nut exposure. EpiPen administered 2 minutes ago. Right thigh, 0.15 milligrams. He's responsive, but breathing is still labored. Please send paramedics immediately. She hung up. The entire call took 38 seconds. Gregory stood frozen near the kitchen door, his mouth open, his managerial authority evaporating in real time. Diners craned their necks. Kitchen staff pressed their faces to the pass window. The room was holding its breath, but not for the boy, for her. Because Diane Prescott had already picked up her phone, and the narrative she was constructing had nothing to do with the truth. She called Edmund Ashford's executive office line. Her voice was controlled, a performance of concern, so polished it could have been rehearsed. There's been an incident at the restaurant. The children are fine, but one of the waitstaff became aggressive and physically handled Oliver without my permission. I tried to stop her. I think we need security. She may have injured him. She hung up, turned to Gregory, and delivered her ultimatum with the cold authority of someone who had been weaponizing other people's fear for years. I want her removed from this restaurant immediately. If she's not gone in 60 seconds, I will personally ensure this establishment never hosts another Ashford event. Do you understand me? Gregory looked at Brianna on the floor. Both children pressed against her, one of them still struggling to breathe. Then he looked at Diane, standing powerful, connected. He chose power. He stepped toward Brianna. Brianna, maybe you should... Heather's voice cut across the room from behind the bar like a thrown knife. Greg, if you finish that sentence, I'll call the health department myself. She just saved that kid's life. The dining room went dead silent. Gregory retreated. Diane's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Not yet. She was recalculating. Brianna didn't engage. Not with Diane, not with Gregory, not with anyone. She stayed on the floor with the twins, her back straight, her hands moving. She signed a story, the story of the brave lion who couldn't roar, a lion born without a voice. All the other animals laughed at him because a lion is supposed to be loud, supposed to shake the earth when he speaks. But one day, a wildfire swept across the savannah. Every animal screamed. Every animal ran in circles, blinded by smoke and terror, except the silent lion. He walked calmly through the chaos because he was the only one who could think clearly when the world was on fire. He led every single one of them to the river, and not one of them laughed at him again. Sometimes she signed to Oliver, her fingers trembling on the last word, "The quietest one in the room is the strongest." This was the story she used to tell Raymond every night before bed. She hadn't told it in 2 years. Her hands shook on the final signs, but she finished. Oliver's breathing was stabilizing. The color was returning to his face. We looked up at Brianna and signed back 2 words. "I like that lion." Eloise curled into Brianna's side like a small animal seeking warmth, was drawing again. Her crayon moved with fierce intensity, not the soft strokes of a child doodling, but the hard, deliberate lines of someone capturing a moment she refused to let the world forget. At the far end of the bar, Carl set down his club soda. He had seen everything. The allergic reaction, Diane's negligence, the waitress who saved the child, the phone call spinning lies. He stepped into the service corridor. He dialed Edmund Ashford directly. The call was 4 sentences. "Sir, Oliver had an anaphylactic episode. The nanny didn't check allergens. A waitress found the EpiPen and administered it, saved his life. Miss Prescott is now trying to have her fired. You need to come." Silence on the line. When Edmund's voice, low, controlled but vibrating underneath with the kind of fear only a parent knows. "I'm on my way. Don't let anyone leave." Somewhere in Midtown, a black town car pulled away from a high-rise. Edmund Ashford sat in the back seat with his hands pressed together, knuckles white. Not from anger, though. The anger was there. From fear. The kind that arrives after the danger has passed and shows you exactly how close you came to losing everything. 12 minutes to the Upper East Side. And inside Lamian Door, a woman who had just saved his son was still kneeling on the floor, telling a story about a lion who couldn't roar, and she had no idea what was coming. But Diane wasn't finished. She straightened her blazer, walked to where 2 women were dining near the window, regulars by the look of their comfort, and spoke just loudly enough for Brianna to hear. "Can you believe this? They let her kneel next to those children on the floor, touching them. In a restaurant like this, I don't even let my cleaning lady touch my bags." She glanced back at Brianna. "And honestly, someone should tell management that this kind of presence in the VIP section is making guests uncomfortable. This is the Upper East Side, not a food truck." One of the women looked at Brianna, then back at Diane and said nothing. The other took a long sip of wine and looked away. That was the thing about Diane Prescott. She didn't need allies, she just needed silence. And silence was the one thing this restaurant had always been happy to provide. Brianna heard every word. Her jaw tightened. Her hands didn't stop moving. She kept signing to Oliver. She kept telling the story because she had spent her entire life being told where she didn't belong, and she had never once let that stop her from staying where she was needed. The paramedics arrived at 8:22. Two men, one stretcher they didn't need because Oliver was already stable, sitting upright in Brianna's lap, breathing steadily, his small hand wrapped around her index finger. The lead paramedic checked Oliver's vitals, reviewed the EpiPen dosage, and turned to Gregory with a look that landed somewhere between respect and disbelief. Whoever administered that EpiPen did it by the textbook. Timing, dosage, injection site, all perfect. Another 30 minutes without it, and we'd be having a very different conversation tonight. Gregory said nothing. Diane stepped forward. She adjusted her blazer, the porcelain mask reassembled, though the hairline cracks were visible now if you knew where to look. Her voice was smooth, practiced, boardroom ready. I represent the Ashford family. This waitress physically intervened with children under my care without authorization. I want her terminated tonight, and I want a written apology from this restaurant delivered to the Ashford estate by tomorrow morning. Gregory, spineless to the last, nodded slowly. He turned to Brianna, who was still on the floor, still holding Oliver's hand. I'm sorry, Brianna. I have to ask you to... The front door opened. Not with force, not with noise, with the quiet, absolute authority of a man who never needed to announce himself because every room he entered already knew. Edmund Ashford stepped into Lamian door. Gray cashmere coat, silver hair, 52 years old, one carrying every one of them in his eyes. He was not a large man, but his presence was enormous, the kind of gravity that makes a room recalibrate before anyone understands why. His eyes swept the restaurant in 1 second, found his children on the floor clinging to a woman in a black apron, found Diane standing over them with a pointed finger, found Gregory mid-sentence about to fire the only person who had acted. Carl near the bar gave a single nod. Everything I told you confirmed. Edmund walked across the dining room. Every step was measured, deliberate, the stride of a man who had commanded boardrooms and collapsed markets with a single sentence. We stopped directly in front of Diane, Miss Prescott, 2 syllables. Quiet as a closing door, heavy as a verdict. Diane's face, and this is important because this is where her entire world ended, went through 4 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, denial, and then raw animal terror. The porcelain mask didn't crack this time. It shattered. The pieces fell behind her eyes where nobody could pick them up. Mr. Ashford, the waitress, she overstepped. I was just... He didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. I received a phone call 20 minutes ago that my son nearly died from anaphylaxis. That the woman I entrusted with my children's safety didn't check a basic allergy card. That the only person in this restaurant who communicated with my deaf children in their own language is the woman you are trying to have fired. We turned to the twins. He knelt. The billionaire knelt on the same cold marble where the waitress knelt, and he signed with hands that were fluid, practiced, full of love. Are you okay? Daddy's here. Oliver and Eloise crashed into his arms. Silent sobs, the shaking kind. Then Oliver pulled back, turned, and pointed at Brianna. His small hands flew. She talked to us, Daddy. She heard us. She told us the lion story. She saved me. Eloise nodded and pressed her sketchbook against her father's chest. Edmund looked up at Brianna. Their eyes met. His were wet. Hers were wet. No words for a moment. Only silence. And in that silence, everything. Then he stood, faced Diane one final time. Miss Prescott, you're terminated, effective this moment. Your access to all Ashford accounts, properties, and systems is revoked. Carl will escort you out, and my legal team will be contacting you tomorrow morning regarding $2.3 million in irregular transactions from the Foundation's discretionary fund. The mask was gone. What was left was small, pale, exposed. Well, her mouth opened. Nothing came out. He turned to Gregory. And you watched a woman mistreat 2 deaf children in your restaurant. You did nothing. When the only person who helped was threatened with termination, you took her side. He paused. I'll be speaking with your ownership group. Gregory opened his mouth. Nothing came out either, and then something happened that nobody in that restaurant expected, least of all Brianna. Edmund Ashford asked her to sit down. The paramedics cleared Oliver and left. The restaurant resumed with the shell-shocked hum of a room that had just witnessed something it couldn't process. Diane was gone, escorted out by Carl, her Hermes bag clutched to her chest like a life raft, her heels clicking unevenly on the marble for the first time. Rhythm broken, mask broken, everything broken. Gregory was in his office with the door closed, calling his lawyer or his therapist or both. Edmund asked Brianna to sit at the twins' table, not as a waitress, as a guest. He ordered tea for both of them. The twins sat between them like small bridges between two islands of grief. Oliver leaned against Brianna's arm as if she were a wall he'd been searching for his whole life. Eloise sat cross-legged in her chair, sketchbook in her lap, crayon moving, eyes flicking between Brianna's face and the page. Edmund signed as he spoke effortlessly, beautifully, the way people speak a language they learn through love rather than study. "My wife's name was Margaret," he said. "She was deaf from birth. She was a visual artist, painted, sculpted, did things with color that made people who could hear feel like they were the ones missing something. She taught me ASL on our second date. I fell in love with her hands before I fell in love with anything else about her." He paused, kind of pause that isn't empty but overfull. "She died 3 years ago. Complications from surgery. The twins were 5. They remember her hands, the shape of them, the way they moved when she said goodnight. They're starting to forget her face." His voice didn't break. It bent. "I carry that every day." Since Margaret's death, he told her he'd hired 14 nannies, 8 interpreters, 3 child development specialists. None of them lasted. Not because they lacked credentials. Their resumes were flawless. But the twins could tell the difference. They could always tell the difference between someone who had learned their language and someone who had lived it, between professional care and the kind of love that doesn't clock out. "My children don't need someone who knows sign language," Edmund said quietly. "They need someone who understands silence." He looked at Brianna, steady, certain. "Who understands silence?" Brianna was quiet for a long time. The restaurant hummed around them. Glasses, footsteps, murmured conversations. But at this table none of it reached. Then she told him about Raymond. Not the facts, not the timeline. She told him the way you tell someone about a person you loved more than language can hold, by giving them the small things, the things that mattered. She told him how Raymond used to sign good morning with only one hand, because the other was always holding a cereal bowl. How she taught him the word thunder during a blackout when he was 9, pressing his palm flat against the window pane so he could feel the vibration through the glass, and he laughed so hard he fell over, because he said it felt like the sky was knocking. How his laugh came out uneven and too loud, and was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. She told him about the last morning. Raymond at the door, backpack on, late for work. He turned and signed 5 words. "You are my voice, Ree." Then he smiled the crooked, too big smile that made his whole face disappear into joy and stepped off the curb. 5 minutes later, he was gone. "I haven't signed since his funeral," Brianna said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Tonight, when I knelt next to Oliver and my hands started moving, I felt him. Everywhere. In the shape of Oliver's signs. In the way Eloise grabbed my hand. In the silence that wasn't empty, full." She looked at the twins. "I didn't save your son tonight, Mr. Ashford. Your children saved me." Edmund was silent for a long time. Then he raised his hands and signed one word. "Thank you." The silence that followed was not awkward. It was sacred. 2 strangers sitting in the ruins of the worst night of their lives, discovering that their grief had the same shape. Then Edmund reached into the twins' backpack. He pulled out the laminated sheet, the one Brianna had found when she retrieved the EpiPen, the emergency ASL signs for medical situations. Worn, soft at the edges, creased from folding and unfolding, held so many times the lamination had started to peel. "You noticed this," he said. "It's worn," Brianna replied. "Someone used it a lot. Margaret made it. She made 12 of them, one for every bag, every car, every room the twins might be in. She knew she might not always be there, so she left instructions in her language, in their language." He turned the sheet over. On the back, in small handwritten letters, faded but still legible, Margaret had written, "If you're reading this, you're already the right person. Just listen with your hands." Brianna read it. Her hands covered her mouth, her shoulders folded inward. She broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. The way a dam breaks when the last crack reaches the foundation. Edmund's voice was gentle. I've shown that note to 14 caregivers over 3 years. You're the first one who cried. Juan. And then Eloise tugged on her father's sleeve. She held up her sketchbook. She had been drawing all night through the cruelty, through the emergency, through this conversation, her crayon moving with the intensity of someone recording something sacred. And now she turned to the page and held it up for everyone to see. The drawing showed Brianna kneeling on the floor, hands mid-sign, exactly as she had looked when she first spoke to Oliver. Every detail was there, the black apron, the curly hair in its bun, the gentle curve of her fingers forming a word. But Eloise had drawn something else. Behind Brianna, faintly in lighter crayon, almost translucent, there was a second figure, a young boy standing just behind her, his hands raised in the same sign. He was smiling, and he looked like Brianna. At the bottom, when Eloise's shaky handwriting, the lady who hears us, and the boy who sent her. Eloise had drawn Raymond. She had never met him. She had never heard his name. She had never been told he existed. But she drew him, standing behind his sister, signing, smiling, present. Oliver looked at the drawing, then at Brianna. He signed slowly, carefully. Is that your brother? Brianna nodded. She couldn't speak. She couldn't sign. She could only hold the drawing and weep. Oliver signed, He's here. He helped you find us. Edmund Ashford, a man who had built an empire, commanded boardrooms on 4 continents, buried the only woman he ever loved, put his face in his hands, his shoulders shook. The restaurant fell completely, totally silent. Not the trained silence of waitstaff, not the polished silence of wealth. The real kind, the sacred kind, the kind that falls over a room when something is happening that is bigger than anyone in it. And every person knows, without being told, that they are witnessing something they will carry for the rest of their lives. Edmund composed himself. He reached across the table and took Brianna's hand. 3 months from now, the Ashford Foundation is launching the largest deaf education initiative in American history, Margaret Ashford National Program. $150 million, 50 cities, mentors, schools, technology advocacy. I've been building it for 2 years. He paused. I have a boardroom full of executives, consultants from 4 countries, policy advisors, curriculum designers, a communications team, but I don't have the one person I need most. Brianna looked at him. I need someone who kneels, someone who understands that communication isn't about hearing. It's about showing up. Someone who tells the story of the silent lion and means every word. He slid a card across the table, embossed heavy stock. Ashford Foundation for Deaf Children, Director of Community Outreach and Youth Programs. This isn't charity, he said, and it isn't gratitude. My children spoke to you for 20 minutes tonight. In those 20 minutes you gave them something 14 professionals in 3 years could not. He paused. You gave them someone who hears them. Brianna stared at the card, then at the twins, then at her hands. The hands that had been silent for 2 years, that she had believed were broken, that she thought had signed their last word, the day she lowered her brother into the ground. And for the first time in 2 years, Woe's hands didn't feel broken anymore. Brianna looked at the card for a long time. She looked at the twins, Oliver still leaning against her arm, Eloise watching her with those quiet, ancient eyes that saw things most adults never would. She looked at Edmund. I have one condition. Edmund raised an eyebrow. Name it. The program's mentorship wing, one that pairs ASL-fluent adults with deaf children in underserved communities. I want it named after my brother. Edmund didn't hesitate, not for a breath. What was his name? Raymond. Raymond Townsend. Edmund nodded slowly. Way you nod when something that has been searching for its name finally finds it. Raymond's Bridge, he said. Because that's what he built. Between your world and theirs, between hearing and silence, between being invisible and being seen. Oliver tugged on Brianna's sleeve. His face was confused, hopeful, afraid. He signed. What's happening? Brianna smiled. It was the first real smile she had worn in 2 years. kind that starts at the mouth but finishes somewhere deep in the chest where grief has been holding the door shut. She signed back, "I'm staying." Oliver's face broke open with joy. He threw his arms around her neck so hard she nearly fell backward off the chair. Then Eloise signed one word, the word that had been evolving throughout this entire evening. From the moment Brianna knelt on the cold marble, through the emergency, through the story of the lion, through the drawing, through every silent moment that had been building toward this. Not friend, not teacher, not helper, family. Brianna signed it back. Family. Edmund signed it too. Family. 3 people, 1 word. The same shape is made by 6 hands. 2 large, 2 medium, 2 small. In the golden light of a Manhattan restaurant that would never be the same. The chandelier still glowed, the carpet still swallowed the sound, the marble floor was still cold. But the silence in Lamian door had changed. It was no longer the silence of exclusion, of invisibility, of children who had been taught that their language was a burden. It was the silence of something beginning. 6 months later, Brianna Townsend stood at a podium in Washington, D.C. Behind her, a banner stretched across the stage. Raymond's Bridge, Ashford Foundation. In the audience, educators, lawmakers, disability rights advocates, parents of deaf children who had driven from 12 different states to be in this room. On the screen behind her, projected 10 feet tall, was a crayon drawing, a woman kneeling, hands mid-sign, and a translucent boy standing behind her. The lady who hears us, and the boy who sent her. In 6 months, Brianna had placed 200 ASL fluent mentors in underserved communities across 30 cities. The program's waitlist had 4,000 families. 3 state legislators had just introduced bills modeled on the Ashford Initiative's framework, requiring ASL fluent staff in all public schools with a deaf enrollment above 10%. It felt like a lifetime ago that I was just a waitress, but here we were, changing the landscape of education. I still visited the twins every single weekend. They called me Auntie Bree, and honestly, that title meant more to me than any award. Oliver had even started a YouTube channel where he taught hearing kids how to sign. His first video hit 2.5 million views within 48 hours, and the comment section was a masterclass in human kindness. Eloise's drawings had been exhibited at the MoMA Children's Gallery. And the New York Times art critic called her work a visual language of empathy that most adults never learn to speak. Edmund and I had built something neither of us expected, a partnership rooted not in romance, but in something much rarer. It was built on shared grief, shared purpose, and the deep silent understanding that the people who actually change the world are not the loudest ones in the room, but the ones who kneel. While we were healing, justice was catching up to those who had tried to bury us. Diane Prescott was indicted on 12 counts of embezzlement and fraud. She had siphoned $2.3 million from the Ashford Foundation over 18 months, money that was earmarked for hearing aids, school interpreters, and early childhood intervention programs. She spent it on a vacation home in the Hamptons and a wardrobe that could finance a small country. Her trial lasted 3 weeks, and it was brutal. She was convicted on all 12 counts and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. During the sentencing, I watched the judge read Margaret Ashford's mission statement aloud, one about every deaf child deserving a world that speaks their language. Diane sat there with her head bowed. The porcelain mask of wealth and arrogance was gone. What remained was just a woman, small and pale, finally facing the weight of what she had stolen. Not just money, but safety from children who couldn't even cry out for help. And then there was Gregory Dawson. He was terminated by the Lamon Door ownership group immediately after the incident went viral. A diner sitting 2 tables away had recorded the entire evening. Diane's cruelty, the way she grabbed their wrists, we kneeling on the floor, signing to a choking child while the manager tried to fire me. It was all there in high definition. That video reached 18 million views in 8 days. Comment section became a global monument to public outrage. Gregory was replaced by a manager who actually understood humanity, someone who implemented mandatory disability awareness training for all staff and hired 2 ASL fluent servers. Now, in the lobby of the Ashford Foundation headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, surrounded by marble floors, natural light, and the quiet hum of purposeful work, a single drawing hangs on the wall, framed in gold behind museum glass. It is a simple crayon sketch of a woman kneeling, her hands in mid-sign, war, and a boy standing behind her with the same hands raised. Beneath it, a small brass plaque reads, "Listen with your hands." Edmund walks past it every morning. Every single morning he stops, and every single morning he signs, "Thank you," to the empty air. But I know it is not empty. This story is not about a billionaire who rescued a waitress. It is not about money or luck or being in the right place at the right time. This story is about a choice that a restaurant full of people had the chance to make, and only one person did. 40 guests saw 2 silent children. 40 guests saw a woman treating them like furniture. 40 guests heard nothing because the children had no voice to cry out with. But I didn't need to hear them to listen. I didn't need permission to care. I didn't need authority to act. I didn't need anyone to tell me that those children mattered. I knelt, I signed, I stayed. That is the whole lesson. That is the entire philosophy, in 3 simple verbs. Show up for people who have been made invisible. Speak the language of whoever is in front of you, even if it isn't yours. Even if the world tells you it isn't your place. And when everyone around you says it's not your table, not your problem, not your business, stay anyway. Because sometimes the most powerful thing in the world isn't a billionaire's checkbook. It's a pair of hands that say, "I hear you." If this story moved you, if you felt something when that woman knelt on the cold marble and signed to 2 children the whole world had ignored, then do one thing for me. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel, and if you know sign language, use it. If you don't, learn one sign today. Just one. Start with the sign for friend, because you never know when those 5 fingers will be the only bridge between someone and the rest of the world.